Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight. And if that music you hear in the background, that's a music you heard in your households for 10 years. But today's guest had a big part. He had a big reason why that show was successful for 5 seasons. But it's more than just this show, Beverly Hills 90210, that really tells the story about this iconic writer, director, producer. He has done so many things in his career and has been a credit to the TV industry. And it is my pleasure to introduce to you the one and only Mr. Charlas Rosin. And Charles, I want to thank you for coming on today. It's a real honor for me.
Oh, well, I appreciate that, Mike. Where am I talking to you from today? I'm in Venice, California. You're based, where are you?
I'm in Derby, Connecticut, and we've had tons of snow the last week or so. So it has not been fun, but I wish I was where you were right now, but we're making the most of it.
All right.
Yeah. So Charles, I think the first question I would ask you is, obviously you've had a career that's been decades now that goes back as far as the 70s, but where did you get the love to want to do this? I mean, did it start at a young age? Where would you say your passion for this began?
When you said this, do you mean my passion for television?
Just like being in the TV industry, getting involved.
Well, the difference is that most people who get into this kind of thing do it because as a young person, they were a fan. So I was a fan of television. And why I was a fan of television is because when you were watching television, you didn't have to study, you didn't have to read, you didn't have to do stuff. And my parents were terrific. I love my parents. My father was a doctor. He was married to my mom for 63 years. Wow. But he was chief of staff of a hospital here in Los Angeles, and it was a very social position, and they were social anyway. So they went out all the time. So it was me and the television. So watching Leave It to Beaver and Perry Mason probably, shaped those early years. And with my older sister, who's departed, but Barbara, coming back from junior high at the time. And I was 5 years old, and I would wait for her to get off the bus, and we'd run inside the house in the flats of Los Angeles and turn on the TV, which of course was in black and white, for a live broadcast from Philadelphia of American Bandstand with Dick Clark. So I knew all of the 50s music. There was, a decade later, there was TV. You're there. And the thing is, though, because both my father and mother were essentially locals. One went to Hollywood High, one went to LA High. One went to SC, one went to UCLA. That it was that a lot of their friends were local, and their friends were doctors, and their friends were parents of other kids in the school systems. And yes, my father was a prominent pediatrician. He did have many show business clients that he rarely talked about, so I couldn't even tell you who most of them were. Although I did have some exchanges with some over the years and as such. But I did go to Beverly Hills High School because a lot of people moved to Beverly Hills in the 60s to take advantage of what was then a top-notch educational system. When I was going to Beverly Hills High School, there were lots of kids like Andrea Zuckerman trying to get in because as Darren Star wrote in the pilot episode, that you get the best, teachers and the best facilities and the best everything. And that's kind of, I was blessed with that as a public school teacher, but we were as a public school student, I should say. But we were, and there were showbiz kids there whose fathers were producers and this and that. And a lot of them, in fact. I mean, if you remember, old people who are listening, if they might remember a group called Dino, Desi, and Billy. Well, that was Dean Martin's son. That was Billy Henshey, who I played baseball against, and Tony Sales, who I was we had sixth grade together before they moved back to New York City. So, there was a lot of that. And Desi Arnaz Jr. was in my acting class in high school. So you had show business all around. But the pursuit more was, academic success and a future in college. And it wasn't as, remember the other thing that really obviously would have shaped my life, Mike, is I went to Beverly Hills High School in an era that was defined as being anti-materialistic. So, a lot of the glitter and glitz that we were portraying in 90210, and certainly really came more as a cultural Americana thing in like the 1980s, as opposed to the 60s, when I'm talking about when I was in high school, being very anti-materialistic. So there'd, been a jump in time. In fact, when I got the gig to do 90210, one of the first things we did with the new staff was go to the high school in 1990 to see it. And myself and one of the writers named Amy Spees, we both went to high school there. But the rest of them were, whoa, I'm seeing Beverly Hills High School. And they were incredibly disappointed by the mundaneness of it all. Because by this point, the vibe in Beverly Hills High School was not what you would be writing a television series called Beverly Hills 90210 about. We wrote about, I always pointed out to them that we wrote about a school called West Beverly High School that didn't exist and was an amalgamation of about 5 different private schools that smatter over the area, So,
right.
So the idea being, I was groomed to be, they realized I had no aptitude for being a doctor like my dad. So I became groomed pretty early on to be a lawyer. I expected to be a litigator like Perry Mason, or at least I liked going to court. And I started taking drama courses in high school to get better at presentation. But I still was, would have defined myself as an upcoming lawyer. I like to argue. I was politically oriented. So it made certain sense. But I worked in Washington, D.C. in 1973 as a congressional intern for the summer. And I remember the look on my father's face when I said to him that being there confirmed my commitment to journalism. And he said, "What happened to the law?" And my glib answer, but one that got to the nub of the problem, was there are no adjectives in the law. There are no shadings in the law.
Right.
So I guess I'm a shady figure, and I like my dad used to speak about him a lot today for some reason, but that the world was not black and white. And I elaborate on that and said, yes, it's an infinite series of grays. And I like that in the middle, a bunch of grays. And so, doing the show the way that we did, it was a reflection of an unlikely marriage of the aesthetic of Aaron Spelling, which was rooted in the 70s and the 80s, and this upstart punk television operation from Fox that saw themselves as not only a little boys network, but a dirty little boys network. So they had trouble processing a girls show. And 90210 was a girls show from the day I walked into it. Basically, I had my daughter at that point, when I took the job in 1990, was 5.5 years old. And I know this is going to sound highfalutin to some extent, but it was really what was on my mind, is that here I'm given the access to a huge, even if it was a small show that nobody expected to do well, that's still a huge audience. And this was in the era of network television, even if it was the 4th network. So audience was big size to, hear what I was going to say. And I just didn't want to make it that the only choice that my daughter at then would have when she's a teenager is to be a Madonna or a whore. That there was lots of places in the middle, and you could be in touch with your emotions and sexual feelings and be a good person. And that was not a prevailing wisdom of most television shows at the time. In fact, the other thing I want to talk with you a little bit about, Mike, before our time's done, is a little bit about the Rosin report. I think you might be interested in that, but which is something I wrote last year in 2025. Right. And in there, I did a lot of stuff talking about 90210 and a column called TV Days. And maybe I'm going to merge them together someday and see if there's a book around. But one of the articles that I did, and one of the columns that I wrote, was about the first and only time I met Rupert Murdoch. And the only time we ever spoke to each other, which was it was in my 5th and what turned out to be my last season. And we were at a publicity premiere for the show, a new spelling show on Fox called Models Inc.
Yeah.
And Aaron was excited about Models Inc., but he couldn't break away. So he sent me my proxy. And my friend Sandy Grushow was the president of Fox at that point. I wanted to keep working with Fox. So I definitely was going to go have a chance to be with my president, It seemed all good there. And I'm there. And I also turned out I knew one of the actresses. Our kids happened to be in the same class at school, but in nursery school. But here you were in this dark room, and they're introducing the stars, and they're really very sexy women, and they're all standing up there. My friend was Garcelle Bouvet, who went on then to be one of the Beverly Hills housewives, I guess. But I knew her back when younger time. And all these other people. And I realized that I'm in this audience. I don't know. And I'm standing directly behind Rupert Murdoch. So I tap him on the shoulder and introduce myself as Charles Rosin, the executive producer of 90210. And he's very gracious. Definitely recognition, definitely knows that we had accomplished something. And he shakes my hand with a smile and then asks me with a perfectly earnest way, without any anger at all, why does your show have to be so liberal? And I'm talking to Rupert Murdoch. So, and he goes on to say that I'm just messing the boat by doing all our social drama, that we really should have a lot of sexy and sparkle and only romance. We had a lot of romance, but and all that up on the stage. And he would point it out to that. And I said, well, Rupert, Mr. Murdoch, they tell me that we're in 100. They tell me that we're the second most popular show in the world, and we're in 125 countries. So we must be doing something right. So I think I'm just going to keep on doing what I've been doing. And he thanked me. He smiled. He thanked me, shook my hand, walked away. I was never asked to run a television show for the Fox Broadcasting Company.
That's a neat story.
That's my one and only Rupert. And if you like that, since remember I took that in the Rosin report, at the end, I do have some material that if people want to know either more about stuff, I put out to friends and acquaintances last year in a monthly basis from January to December. And it'll give you a really good sense of what my life has been about, and a lot about LA centric, a little bit for people who are interested in that, and some show business stuff. So maybe we'll see if anybody ever wants it. They can contact you, Mike, and then you can relay them off to me.
Absolutely. And Charles, you know what I really think that one of the things that Fox did well to get that series noticed is it was very smart, because if you remember the first season, they decided they were going to have The Simpsons compete with Cosby. And The Simpsons had become very popular with young kids, even kids in high school were watching it. And they put 90210 on the same night as The Simpsons. So while you're watching The Simpsons, you're seeing the promos for 90210. And I really believe that got more of an audience for them because they would see the advertisement and they'd say, oh, this looks, I know for me, that's how I started watching it, is I would see the promos for it. And people forget too, that was one of the first few shows that really, in my opinion, got Fox as a serious contender, a serious player, because they did have, 21 Jump Street, Married with Children, Tracy Ullman. They had some good shows, no doubt about it. But this was like their first, in my opinion, Thursday night prime time.
Simpsons, yeah. I agree with you. Simpsons, Married with Children, In Living Color, and Us. They were the four. Tracy Ullman, took her work to other places. So I don't associate her with Fox in the same way, even though I know it was there for a while. Do you know what those four shows have in common? Barry Diller, who was the president of Fox and started Fox, you know the name. I know you do, Mike. Did you read his book? Did you check out his book?
I did not see it yet. No.
I bet you'd like it. It's called Who Knew? Worth a read. Especially given I can tell what your interests are, so you're really interested. But you realize that he wasn't, by the time he got to Fox, he really didn't even want to be there. And he wasn't that great. He didn't like any of those four shows. Not one of them. And that included us. He liked what we were trying to do, but he didn't think it belonged with their brand, which again was the Little Boys Network, the alternative network. What would later become the Beavis and Butthead network, but it wasn't as associated with it. The Bart Simpson network, that was, and God bless them for it. They knew that's what they wanted. That's what they did, We benefited. What put 90210 on them, what saved 90210 and allowed us to go more than just that first season was the Gulf War. Yeah. Yeah. Which I wrote about and talked about. You want to should I bring that? The point being that when we invaded Iraq, and even before the launch of that, and I'm talking about in 1991, in Desert Storm it was called. When all the networks canceled their advertising and took off all their scripted programming and instead followed the news. Fox didn't have a news department, which I know is hard to believe, but they didn't have one. All they had was the broadcast, they were a broadcast service. They had those nights. They showed the original, all they had. And the war only merited the blackout of regular television for about 3 weeks. So there was 3 weeks of preemptions, and the only thing on was episodes of Beverly Hills 90210.
Right.
When the war ended, I started saying my prayers, starting them and ending them with the same thing, which was, God bless the children of New York City, because they obviously had nothing else to do. And with all their shows were gone, and they all watched 90210, and we had a real renaissance. Then LA was right behind it, and Fox had very limited access at that time. They didn't have the same station permutation. The next big wave, our audience jumped. There was that first one, and it just rose and rose and rose and stopped, somewhere in the second season, pretty much. And we relit it again, getting into the third season. Second season was by far the toughest one to do.
I also think, though, Charles, the second season, though, the popularity just took off. I mean,
that was part of the problem.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, how do you, and we talked about this, my friend, Peter Ferrero does this podcast and stuff. And, how do these young kids, how do they deal with that kind of just mind-blowing fame that just came out of nowhere? All of them. couldn't go here, couldn't go this, huge celebrities. My friend, I can tell you a story about Jason at that time at the end of the first season. It was the last season that the Showtime Lakers would get to the playoffs for a while with Magic Johnson and Kareem. They were still there. It was the last time they got there, and they were playing the Chicago Bulls, and the Bulls would go on to win their first championship with Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
But in the first round, Jason and I take Jason as my guest to come to the playoff, because my cousin and I had seats all during Showtime. It was really a lot of fun, a great time to be a sports watcher. And Jason was really worried that he wouldn't be able to walk around the stadium and sit down and not be like his shirt ripped off. He didn't know what would be, but that was in his mind as we start walking. Everybody is waiting for this game. Nobody's really looking at who's who. There are a lot of other celebrities that I don't know. Nobody pays any attention. We're up. We get we're nice seats right in the center court. We're talking. I remember at one point looking over and Jason's saying to the woman next to him, "Oh, it's a show on Fox Network. You wouldn't know it." I mean, he was fine being, out in public then. But after that was just at the end of the first season. That's years later. I was once sitting on a bench in Wilmington, North Carolina, with Katie Holmes. And we had just shot the last episode of Dawson's Creek. And I told her that none of the episodes were going to air till the next month. And I had mentioned to her that this will be the last time she'll ever be able to do that again. It's just sit out, have a beer right there, don't worry, not this, and savor this moment. And then I didn't have much to do with the show. And then years later, when that show was ending and she did her press tour, she quoted me. She said that was the most memorable thing she came out of the experience at the time, So.
Right. Charles, and this is no knock. Like, listen, as time goes on, people are just not going to feel the same about a show like they once do. But I really felt after you left after the fifth season, it just seemed like a different feel of 90210. Like that fifth season, like Luke Perry to me made that fifth season. The whole thing with Dylan losing his money, hitting
the fourth season. Yeah, that was one of our favorite things, Mike. Thank you for saying that. Bringing that up, that was one that we when I pitched the storyline to Aaron Spelling that his a long lost sister is going to show up with the woman, and they're going to show at the doorstep, and they're actually, the mother is actually going to be part of a grift, and they're going after the money. That he said, everybody will know that from the moment on. And I said to Mr. Spelling, I will make it that by the time this pays off, everyone will have forgotten whatever suspicions they would have had by the way we play it. Yeah. And we were able to really ramp that up so that nobody was expecting that moment to happen. And the response to our season ender in season 4 were the best national reviews we ever got. I was happy about that. Yeah. As far as what came after I left, I really gave a lot to the show. The show, and this is said with a lot of humbleness, humility, and clarity, that they wouldn't have got through the first 6 episodes if I wasn't there, let alone the first year. It started to solidify. We lost a lot of our coolness when Spelling kind of booted propaganda off the screen. Those guys were very cool, and they brought a lot of that sensibility to the vibe of making the show. But this really was, this was we were working for Aaron. We knew that, and he and his partner Duke Vinson were great teachers to me, particularly the Duke. He taught me some things, and,
Charles. One of the things that you said one time, it was years ago, and I don't know if you remember it or not, but it really, when you said it, it made me really think about why the characters Steve and Brandon were great friends. You had said you were 50% Brandon, 50% Steve. And what I liked about that was as bad as Steve could be sometimes, he wanted that friend that really was the Boy Scout. And that's what Brandon was. And the same thing with the character Dylan. As tough as he was and the James Dean type guy, he really wanted a true friend in Brandon. So I really like when you said 50% Steve, 50% Brandon. It really made sense what the characters were like.
Well, just realize that it's not those characters or me. It's that I infused things in my being to who they were, that I could relate to them. With Steve, it's because, as I said, my father was a prominent doctor. They built their own house in Truesdale Estates. Groucho Marx was my next door neighbor. I had a car, it's a Camaro at 16. I lived on the right side. There were tracks. I've also told this story, about the tracks running through Beverly Hills, right? And that my first response was, I lived 90210, and I thought that the Walshes lived 90212. So when Barry Dillard changed the name from the class of Beverly Hills to Beverly Hills 902, he didn't even call it Beverly Hills, he just 90210. I went, no, it's 90212, because I wanted them to live near the high school. But when that couldn't be, that was okay. We let that go. 90210 was a better way. I added, Mr. Spelling was really glum at first of the title. And I said, no, just put Beverly Hills before the 90210. Tell Dillard to stop being so cool and just let people know what he's talking about. And we went on. And I when we first did the show for Mr. Spelling, he had no other shows on the air. So
I think
he ran with us. He supported us. If he didn't tell the network guys at Fox to back off on Isn't It Romantic, there's no Isn't It Romantic. We're not talking about AIDS. Now, what you wouldn't know about Aaron Spelling, I made him sound like what a strong individual, what a man with sense and spine. He just stood up and no. He had a special coming out, a major project coming out on HBO called And the Band Played On about AIDS. So he liked AIDS in the conversation because it mattered greatly to him. And the Band Played On, by the way, earned him and my friend Duke Vinson Emmy Awards, and deservedly so.
Right. And I think about this too. It gave kids I think it got a lot of high school kids pumped up for Fridays as well, because they're watching this show Thursdays and it's very popular. And these kids are dealing with the same type of issues that kids all around the world were. And that's what I credit Aaron about, because he was a little, I think in the beginning saying, what do I know about high school? But he trusted the people that he had with him that this could work. And that's always been.
I'll tell you what he knew about high school. He knew that he had a high school TV show that was a big hit called Mod Squad. And while he didn't want it to be all crime, he knew that dealing with kids' issues was a viable topic to sustain a series. And the brilliance of Aaron coming into this, there were so many other shows at the time that were geared to the television market. The leader and the big fail was Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but there was also, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which was a little more mainstream and also niche relative to that. But there was, the Prince was, he was, young. There was something called Whole High, which was like, High School Musical, just early, and Parker Lewis, Can't Lose, and Us. And we were the bottom. We were the one people were least excited about. So Aaron realized he couldn't out-hip the others. We couldn't, be as cutting edge. They tried that in the 2-hour version of the pilot, and it fell really flat. And so he wanted, one of the reasons they chose me is that my background, I wrote TV movies for a decade. And a lot of them had to do with young people and women. So that's where and I wrote issues, by the end of it. So, I was what he wanted, and got into series. But the glitz of glam, the glitz and glamour that you might associate with the television industry was, for me, it was I had family life. I'm very close to my wife. I had family life. I wanted to be, we didn't go out. We didn't do that. We had 3 kids. They were young babies. What are you going to do? You're going to be home, right? And this is so I really didn't. And when especially when I was writing a lot of TV movies, and there'd be, drama and notes, and they don't like it, and this. I go that I should be doing something else. I'm not temperamentally suited for this business. Now I'm perfectly temperamentally suited for it. I've been molded, but back then, not so much, because it is very rough, and it's going through a very tough time now, and it's unfortunate. Right. My daughter's talented. She's just started working on a show for Amazon, and I'm really happy for that, because it's not that much happening. So right now in volume, network television was a volume business. They needed shows, and they hadn't thought of reality yet. Right, and reality didn't come till there was a writer's strike.
So Charles, this gets mentioned a lot on so many of the Facebook sites. So I said I got to ask you this question, because you could finally, put it to bed and tell us the real story behind it. Now, in season 3, in an episode, the character Dylan is telling this lady, when I turn 21, I'm going to inherit hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. But by season 5, when he's recovering his money, it's only $8 million, and he has to give half to J.J. Jones. So that's always been a mystery to fans. How much was Dylan really worth? That people always want to know that. They talk about that, and nobody uncovered that.
When he talks about the millions and millions and millions, that was probably more boastfulness. I don't exactly remember the context.
Yeah.
As you bring it up, that's how it kind of strikes me. He was bragging about it. But did he even really know the real number? And again, let's use 8 million as a text number right now. 8 million now would be what, 40 million?
Yeah.
It's a different, a dollar bot more. So you always have to factor that in as well. But it was a great sum. But it's interesting, because we talk about season 6. All right. Yeah. So the Mr. Spelling had a nice close relationship with Steve and Jessica, but the good move would have been to hire Larry to run the show. But Larry and Mr. Spelling wouldn't have meshed in the same way. I was the person that was
like the buffer,
a good buffer, a good balance. And I just was really burnt out on writing for the same characters. I didn't have that much more that I thought I could contribute. I could react to what other people were bringing me and going da. But coming out of me, there wasn't. I was pretty tired of writing for these characters, and the show was going more soap. You felt really the pulse. I think Larry probably told you. I know you talked to my good buddy Larry Mullen, which is one of the reasons I found me, is that one of the first edicts out of his mouth was no more campus politics. Well, there was a lot. The only reason Brandon was president or this was this, is because you could tell stories. Things would happen there. He would be there. It would be logical. It was a way to trigger stories. Most of that's what, and if one of two of them were more political, it's good that people could have a thought process. One of the things, a lot of people who produced television in those years thought, demeaned the audience and basically said the audience wanted to see the same thing every week. And my point was, I want my audience to turn on and not know what the tone of the episode's going to be. Because it might be funny, it might be this, it might be serious, it may be this, but it's all within the smorgasbord of Beverly Hills 902, the buffet of Beverly Hills 902.
Right. And let me, Charles, I want to touch on the Charlas Rosin report, but one thing I wanted to ask,
sure,
if all the actors stay on the show, which never happens, but if they did, would Dylan and Brenda be the end game for the series? I mean, I know they
you do know, I think, or some of your audience probably knows, and if not, you gotta connect out with my friend Pete and start seeing some of the content that we reviewed on his podcast. But I'm sorry, I got would that be in season? The only way that the triangle worked, the only way that the triangle was approved is because we said at the end Dylan will get back with Brenda.
Yeah.
And we were headed in that direction. And it wasn't a good time for Shannon's personal life and her personal life in relationship to her employer and the company that employs her, and we switched gears to protect ourselves.
Right. Which makes sense.
So that was, of course, that was going to be the end game. They had, and more that I got, but there were years I just didn't think about the show very much, except in terms of my ongoing financial relationship that I have with the show as its first executive producer. But it was just a really, something I had done. It I didn't know how many people really liked it. The industry didn't take it very serious. We got nominated for the Golden Globes and things like that, but it wasn't considered a good show. And oddly enough, as I've watched it now, I know that in its original form with its original music, the episodes hold up much better than a lot of the ones that are most acclaimed, and which is why, among other reasons, we've connected and maintained our original fan base. Now, you're more original than others, Mike, because you were watching it on Thursday night. A lot of our fans who make reference back to schools at that time got to on it. Their prime memory is the 90210 Melrose mix on Wednesdays.
Yeah.
The two-step.
Yeah. And it was just a tremendous show. And, speaking of shows, Charles, one that you wrote that didn't last long, but I liked it a lot, and I was so disappointed that it didn't get a second season, was Leap Years on Showtime. And I loved how good that show was because it would go backwards, it would go forward. It was so
we
cool.
Could have made that show. Mike, thank you. We could have made that show. That show went out too early. There were just some problems with that show. That some of the cast should have been a little better. But it was an interesting premise, and I didn't want to do it the way that they did it. I'm working for them. So you had 3 stories, right? Leap years, past, present, and future.
It was great. It was awesome.
What I wanted to do was they wanted me to divide it equally between the 3. And sometimes I wanted to make it that there'd only be maybe 3 scenes from 2024 or whenever, the most modern one. And then but most of it would have been the first year group and that. Yeah, leap years was fun, and I got to be in Canada. It was when 9/11 happened, so I was actually.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful day. You're an East Coast guy, if you remember that day at all. It was a beautiful day. Certainly in Toronto, one of the most beautiful days that we had in my whole year working there. Still have a nice spot for Toronto, but as you can see, I'm kind of a major baseball fan, and so
am I. And you got the last laugh on us 2 years ago, but
no Yankees, huh? Yeah, I go back. I actually saw. I saw the Yankees beat us twice in 1977 and 78. The Reggie Jackson years. He was a power, but I also was there when Don Drysdale shut the Yankees out in the World Series 1-0 in Game 3 at Dodger Stadium. So that was in '63. Yeah, so that was So we've had a great rivalry, but the this last series with Toronto was just one for the books. It was just
that was baseball needed that, and
baseball there was play after play after play. It was such a fun watch, and being a huge fan. My wife and I actually in New York at the time. We were watching in our hotel bedroom, and couldn't believe what was going on, but we were there because my son was being honored in New York, a big organization that a lot of Canadians had come down from Toronto because that's where the organization started. Right. And so as I said to them, and I would say kind of the same way for you for 2 years ago, when they told me and they were in immediate pain and shock that their team had lost that game in the way that they had the last two games. And I'm really, so we're both really sorry. We're big fans. We understand, but I make a point of saying, right, the last thing I said to these people, said it 5 different times, got 5 different laughs, but she's a lot more sorry than I
am. That's great. Charles, before we get into the Charlas Rosin report, we did lose a wonderful actor that you got to work with. It's a shame that 48 years old is just too young, but I wanted to talk about James Van Der Beek because Dawson's Creek, listen, he was the heart, him and Katie Holmes, they were really the heart and soul of that series. And it really put, in a lot of ways, I talked about Fox with 90210, but Dawson's Creek really put WB on the map in a lot of ways. So just talk about James and what it was like to work with him.
Well, I'm sorry, we'll have to move on. You'll give me another question after that, because I'll tell you why. I was not my time. I didn't realize when I brought up Katie and me being in Wilmington at the end there was only because a lot of my friends made the television show because I had hired most of the crew. But I didn't get along. I faced, and this is the first time I've ever gone public on this, Mike. So here you go. It's a scoop. It's a scoop on the Mike Show. Kevin didn't really. Well, let's start it this way. Kevin tried out for 90210 as an actor, and I didn't know it. And he never got by my casting director to come in for the final auditions. So he wasn't a real big fan of 90210, and he really didn't want to hire me 2 years later to do a show that he wanted a distinct gay voice for, which was fine. But and I could, the goal when you're another writer in someone else's creation is to mimic that voice. That's what you have to be able to imitate voices as a writer. Right. That's the key. That's when you don't like why, when you say, God, it sure changed after season 5 in 90210, it's because the voice wasn't there to make the voice you knew. It's hard to imitate. It's hard to do. Right. And anyway, we got in. It was a stupid thing that he got angry. Oh, it had to do with publicity. And me not thinking that I really even had to be at the publicity thing in this, and I asked him, he's got a problem with me. And I had a really big office because I was this guy and he created the show. and in 15 minutes, he just walked up this, and it was a him or me. And I was pretty good friends with the people who were certainly making the show, and I had just met the cast,
right?
Only one time when they were in LA, and to be truthful, the one of the four that I didn't really get to know well was James. I can't remember me ever talking to James. I know I must have,
right?
But there was no real connection. Like, who are you? And you're coming in, and we got this hot show, and it was a lot of buzz about that show. It was a big job for me to be put onto that show, and I was very proud to be there. And I'd say that the only thing I could say realistically about Dawson's was that how great the cast was in the beginning. Right. This press thing. All I was going to say was our cast I thought was great. This is another great cast. That's what I'm thrilled to be doing. That's all I would have said if anyone was said to compare the shows. Otherwise, I'm not going to be talking. It's his creation. It was all about him. He didn't even want me to show up there. That's a sign that something's not working. We had already broken down your first 7 stories there. So you got that far in the mix. I had already picked out all the locations. We had already got all the thing. Everything was humming on a show, and I was not the key writer to it. It was different. Darren was a key writer in 90210. Darren just chose to go to Melrose and go on his own path, and that was just absolute right thing he should have been doing. But he was a terrific showrunner. I mean, he's a terrific head writer, and every episode there are Darren episodes and there are Rosin episodes, spattered between the first 2 seasons. And then he left, and it was a blow. We had to really rally in season 3. But getting back to Dawson's, just real quickly, it just escalated into a him or me. And so I stayed on to do post-production. And because they had already done most cast, everything was pretty much done. They had, but they were going to be starting to film and direction and stuff. And I only one of the directors I wanted to hire. But he was doing the last show. That's what it was. That's why it came down, because he was doing the last show. So I had my friend doing the last show, the other one, and I got to see the cast then. But I'm connected to the show financially, so I'm always rooting for it. And I know what a loss. I didn't know James. I'm one of the people that got to know James when he was in that funny sitcom on ABC, the bitch in apartment 8A or whatever it is. What's the title, Mike?
Yeah, I forget it too, but I remember. And
the woman 2B. He is so funny. He was so good, and cancer is so despicable, and I'm very sorry. Yeah. And I hope he's doing all right.
Yeah. So, Charles, talk to me about the Charlas Rosin report, because it seems like a tremendous project. So, just talk about that a little bit.
Thank you. Yeah. So so I realized you can see kind of a little bit when you look in the close-up shot. You see all those little statuettes and things on the wall there, and then you could see that I've got some different, this big thing here, and then the Dodger thing over there, and this. Well, I'm in a basement apartment in Venice, a basement room in our house in Venice, and it's covered with stuff. And really, that all of them, I see our Rolling Stone cover. I see the one from the Golden Globes. I see the Golden Globe. Here, we'll have a Golden Globe treat. This puppy's heavy.
Oh, wow. That's nice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the Golden Globe.
That's awesome. That's great to see.
I have to take that one home. That was mine. I'm looking at the picture of Jason holding up. I'm going to be seeing Jason in a couple of weeks, and I'm excited about that.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but, I haven't seen him in a while because we were close making the show. He and James Eckhouse were really the 2 people I'd see, and Gabrielle as well, because Gabrielle's husband has been our business manager for 30 years. We've known those guys a long time. So.
And I think she's the president, isn't she? Of the
she was the former of Screen Actors Guild. Anyway, bringing up this whole thing about the road here. I was going to be putting together this scrapbook, and I decided to, just write about everything that was in here, and some of my memories, and get things down, because I have little grandkids, and I wanted my grandkids to know who their grandpa was. And so the Rosin Report is really kind of a cultural history of stuff in my life in the city in LA and all around, and music and movies and TV from, the 50s on to today. So I put a volume out every month, and people who read it really kind of liked it. So if anyone's interested in seeing this, I am going to probably condense it down. But I have the some of the copies, and I can send them all in one page, and you get links. And it's meant, think of it as a newsletter or a magazine. And if people into sports, there's some of that. People are in the movies, there's stuff for that. There's a little politics, hardly any actually. It was for me to have an anecdote of all my politics. I was so blown away in 2024 at what we were doing that I just said, I don't want to think about politics. So I'm going to decidedly try to write something that's positive and nostalgic and personalized and tells the stories. And guess what? It's for my grandchildren. But I didn't lay that on the readers till the last part of it. I'm actually even doing a quarterly one that I'm going to be starting pretty soon. And I'm going to get it out in the first quarter. And it'll be much more slimmed down than some of these big volumes. So if you'd like to be on the list, Mike, I'll put you. I got your email.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think that's great, Charles. And I just really credit you with what you've brought to the industry. And what I mean by that is, it's one thing, listen, and it's no knock at the actors. They make it work. They make it happen. But it's people like yourself who work endlessly, tirelessly to make the product work, no matter what it is, no matter what you're doing. Like, we brought up leap years before. You were a writer on there, but you made, it happen with the team that you were with. And I really do credit you, because you have been doing this for, especially if we just bring up 90210, when you started with that, that's right there, 36 years of just continuous work that you've been doing. And that doesn't even, go back to the 70s, which you've done. So I really do applaud the work that you've done in your career, and you really are a credit to the industry.
Well, thank you. Well, I am working really hard to try to get some of these original music restored. At least some of the songs the songs that matter the most. We'll see what happens.
You talk about Charles. You talk about the music. The fact that in season 5, when Dylan, is in the coma and things like that. There's a great song by the Police that they took out of there. That was a great song, Material World, which was just tremendous. And then, you weren't around for season 6, but there's a great Lyle Lovett song.
Everybody talks about it. Everybody talks about it.
And they took that out of there. And then, of course, season 3, when Dylan is hugging the younger Dylan and they're playing Can't Cry Hard Enough, they took that out of it. Those are songs that need to be in there for fans who watch this show.
Well, we're going to try to get the song. Yeah. What I realized, I was going after the music, and I went, just pick the song. If I could only restore Can't Cry Enough, then you wouldn't necessarily need every other song that's in the piece, because that's the one that your direct connection was. So I'm trying that argument and seeing if that makes more economic sense for the poobahs who control the banks.
Well, the thing is, listen, it's great that the show, you could watch it anywhere in the world right now, and you could watch it right now. But the music, like anything else, listen, what made the Wonder Years so successful was the music too.
Well, they got their music put back, right?
They did. But, without the music, that takes away from what the history of the show is all about, because the music plays a big part in so many of those shows. You watch that episode where Color Me Bad's on the show, and you can't even show them singing to the cast at the Peach Pit because of the music rights. That's a shame right there,
I think the Color Me Bad got put back.
They got put back in as far as they're in the episode and things. But if you watch the episode, I watched it the other day, and the part where they perform for Donna because she couldn't come because of the thing that
They
happened with her
cut that
parents.
straight out. They don't.
They
sing
cut it right
through?
out. You just don't even hear them sing. They just like go right to the
You
credits.
mean they're in the episode, but you never hear them sing their song?
Right. Yeah.
You don't have
It's a
that
shame.
song in there?
No. I mean, right at the end when they're singing Dream On or whatever it is at the end of the episode, they get ready to sing, and then it just shows David and Donna, and then it goes right to the credits. It's a shame.
I had no idea. Oh, we're gonna
But
end
the
in a
good thing
downer.
is,
All right, I gotta have to put that song in now. God
The
damn
good
it.
thing is, though, Charles, they finally on Paramount Plus put all the episodes where Paramount Plus only had, certain episodes of certain seasons. All the episodes from that series.
Mike, do you know when that started? Do you know when they pulled those episodes? Did you have any?
Well, let's
way
put
to
it this way.
track that?
When I had like purchased Hulu, I think it was 2019, and they were on Hulu at the time. Those episodes were gone then, and then when they went to Paramount Plus, they were still gone. Now they're restored. They're all there, which is
But by
great.
2019, they were already gone.
Yeah. You could only watch season 10, for instance, which isn't one of my favorites, but they didn't even have the last episode ever of season 10 on there, which was a shame. And I think
Isn't that the wedding?
Yeah, they didn't have it on there for the longest time. Now it's finally on there. Yeah. So
Wait a second. Are you telling me that all through that period of time,
all through that period,
when it wasn't on Hulu, and they had took the 60 episodes out, they took out the wedding of David and Donna?
Yeah, it wasn't on there. And
how did they? So there was never any closure. Yeah.
No. Great. And then season 5, they were missing a couple episodes. They didn't have the episode where Dylan first goes into the rehab. I mean, that was a shame. I mean, they just cut, season 2 was missing episodes as well. It was just a shame. But I'm glad that they finally restored all of that. So that's good. That's a good, they got that part done. So maybe the music is next.
Well, we'll see.
Well, Charles, this was a real honor for me, and I definitely want to have you back on. I'd love to have you on with Larry. That would be great.
Well, let's do it a little bit down the road. Let's do it maybe in the fall. We'll see how we're both feeling, or late summer. Baseball time. Yeah, we can.
Yeah, but thank you for giving me a few minutes today. It was a real honor for me, and I just will say this: thank you for everything you did for me as a fan and fans everywhere, because your writing is phenomenal. And folks, I am serious when I say Leap Years was a great show that if you could find it somewhere, watch it. It should have been on for 5 seasons.
Probably on.
Yeah, but it was wonderful. And that's just one of the many talents of this individual right here. He's a credit to the business. We're lucky that he was around all these years, and he just, did his very best to bring us the very best TV. So Charles, thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Take care, buddy. Thank you.
And that's the one and only Charles Rosin for In the Spotlight. I'm Mike Kenichi saying good night, everyone. And there's the Golden Globe.